Recording. Hi, everybody. It's us back for a solo episode for the first time in, I guess, about 4 episodes at this point. And we have decided to have this episode because a very troubling, yet also humorous document has been published by the group known as Hamas, the elected leaders of the Gaza Strip, and technically all of the Palestinian territory, since they did win that election. A document that could have easily been written at an American university, and although written in Arabic as well, is clearly targeting American audiences here. I couldn't believe it when I saw it, but in this day and age, people seem to be able to get away with saying anything they want, especially if it offers an apologetic for discrimination against the Jews. So without further ado, I'm going to turn on screen sharing. And we hope you enjoyed our last podcast with Marat Grinberg. If you haven't had a chance to watch it, I highly encourage it. He goes really deep into the connections of the USSR, anti-Zionism, quote, anti-Zionism and anti-Zionism in college campuses, and relates his own personal experiences as well.
It was one of our best episodes. It
really was. It was terrific. And it complements what we did with Isabella Tabarovsky before the holidays. And we talk about his book too, which is a terrific book. All right, so let me put on screen share as soon as I find the button. Okay, so here we have the document issued by Hamas. There's their official emblem on top. I can't read the Arabic, but presumably it says something about Hamas, the Islamic resistance. And here is this wonderful title page of some happy people standing on top of an Israeli tank, clearly
holding a Palestinian flag.
Yeah. Clearly, this is like straight out of the first Intifada, right? You know, these beleaguered people taking on a militaristic state. The title is very interesting. Well, everyone knows that Operation Al-Aqsa Flood is the name of the operation that they gave to October 7th, and the fact that they're referencing their mosque on the Temple Mount is interesting in and of itself. But I love their choice of words, our narrative. Now, given that this is a document that could have been written at the Ivy Leagues, Hamas should know that narratives in current usage in the academic world don't necessarily mean factual, right? One tells their narrative.
Why don't they say our side of the story?
Yeah. Well, they wouldn't even say that. Side of the story implies that there's another side. They should call it the truth. But they're being good postmodernists here, and they're referring to it as a narrative. Right? And narratives are, of course, contestable. Narratives can be collective memory. They can be a lot of other things. So they must have read their Foucault.
Just go for Paul Harvey, the rest of the story.
The rest of the story, yeah. So Hamas media office, I guess that, I thought their media office was the Associated Press, and we took them out in 2017 or 18 or one of those previous struggles.
Oh, no, they've got another media office under some hospital somewhere, I think.
Oh, okay. All right. That happens to be loaded with mass artillery and whatever.
They also use it for a weapons depot.
Yeah, and launching rockets. I'm assuming you saw the news today about the UNRWA. Yeah. So people who work for the UN were apparently complicit in the actual operation. They're not just apologizing for Hamas now. They are card-carrying members and have played a role.
Oh, yeah. That organization has been staffed with Hamas, literally Hamas members for a long time.
Yeah. Well, so much, my feelings about the UN. I think the whole entity should be abolished. All right. In the name of Allah, the most gracious, the most merciful. So it's already setting it up with an Islamic framework. And as we'll see, they talk about how Palestine is Islamic at many points in here. Which raises the question, what about the Palestinian Christian population? What's supposed to happen to them? Are they written out of this narrative? I mean, they seem to be.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, what are they? How much are they? 7 to 10% of the population? They're not insignificant. I highlighted the good parts. Our steadfast Palestinian people, the Arab and Islamic nations, the free peoples worldwide, and those who advocate for freedom, justice, and human dignity. Intersectionalism here, straight up. Okay. In light of the ongoing Israeli aggression on the Gaza Strip and the West Bank, and as our people continue their battle for independence, dignity, and breaking free from the longest ever occupation, during which they have drawn the finest displays of bravery and heroism in confronting the Israeli murder machine and aggression.
Why don't they just try to make peace with Israel?
Can you explain to me how mass rape is bravery and heroism? I mean, if this were a document written in
Well,
the Crusades, that's what they would say.
that's
So
the kind of thing that we wouldn't get to, because
we're going to get to it. Yeah.
other aspects of this document definitely make that the most pertinent question. But just right off the bat, they begin with this idea, this narrative. That's the word they use, narrative. That this is nothing but an occupation from Israel's side, and Palestinians are completely innocent in everything, and that there is absolutely no recourse whatsoever to uh, get out of this situation other than making war, other than hostility, other than armed conflict. Why don't they just try to make peace?
Well, as we'll
And
see in the
Israel,
documents, they sort of imply that they were, and that they actually were founded as a peaceful organization in 1987. But
where is
Hamas,
it implied? Where is that implied?
I think it's later on when they talk about the era before Baruch Goldstein, about how they were a peaceful entity at that point.
Okay.
So it's later on. But I should add that their, revised or their supplementary charter of 2017, which doesn't negate the original charter because it doesn't denounce the original charter, claims that they're willing to accept a Palestinian state within the 1967 borders, though they will never under any circumstances recognize Israel, and that Palestine is genuinely from the river to the sea. That's not a peace settlement, right? That's a recipe for further war, that we have to accept the status quo because we can't go any further at this point. So why won't Hamas make peace? Well, they are the Islamic resistance movement. I don't know. I mean, why doesn't ISIS make peace? Why doesn't Al-Qaeda try to make peace?
But I mean, they make it sound like resistance is the only answer, right?
Yeah, I mean, and is that not in keeping with some of the revolutionary movements of the 1960s in the post-colonial world?
The Gazans were practically given statehood in 2005, and there was a peace agreement between Israel and Gaza. But when Hamas defeated Fatah, they nullified that peace agreement.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, well, there's no mention of that at all here.
Nothing. There's absolutely no mention of that whatsoever. Yeah, no, it goes straight to the 2007 blockade. It was as if no elections bringing them to power ever took place. They can't admit that they're a legitimate government. They can't do that because then it's state power exercising violence, which puts them in a whole day. So they're not a resistance entity anymore since they exercise power. So they obviously can't mention that. They have a very lovely table of contents. This looks like a very basic PowerPoint template that they used. If you ever look
They
at
have the Palestinian colors, though. The colors.
That is true. Okay, so they put some thought to it, but if you look through the templates in PowerPoint, which perhaps they used to make this initially, this is one of the default templates. I recognize it quite well. It's probably like third or fourth from the top. So they put some thought into it. Nice table of contents. I wonder if the links are clickable. No, they didn't even bother to put in clickable links. Okay, so let's go. There's several sections here. Why they did it, the events itself, toward a transparent international investigation, a reminder to the world who is Hamas. Well, it's good that they clarify things and what is needed. Okay, this sounds like a manifesto coming out of a university campus. First, why Operation Al-Aqsa Flood? The battle of the Palestinian people against occupation and colonialism did not start on October 7th, but started 105 years of Zionist occupation. So they're referring to, of course, the British coming in. Apparently, Palestine was not occupied under the Ottomans in the previous period.
So when the British took over Palestine during World War I, that was the beginning.
Yeah. Now, it really raises the question, though, what about the previous period and why wasn't the Ottoman Empire a form of occupation? To be sure, in earlier centuries, before the era of nationalism, it was a Muslim empire and they were Muslim subjects. So, nobody was thinking in terms of ethno-nationalism at that point. They thought of themselves as Muslims, as perhaps belonging to whatever villages they came from. But there was no, Arab national identity and there was no Palestinian national identity for sure. But in the last century of the Ottoman Empire, you have the rise of nationalism across the board among the Armenians, among the Greeks. I mean, the Armenians got along quite well with the Ottomans until the 1800s, before the genocide. And the same thing was true of the Arabs. There was Arab nationalism before 1917. They were resisting the Turks in various ways. And in fact, the British tried to curry favor with them with Arabs in some regions. So they're clearly positing this as some sort of struggle against the West, right? This is about Western imperialism in many respects. And the Zionists are in coordination with the British colonial authorities. So clearly, this is a collusion. This is a Western imperial project that they are opposing, which of course is not, this is not in keeping with the narrative among many university campuses today. At that time, I got a little liar hair on fire in here, tribute to our good friend over at, what school was he at? Columbia? No, at the Yeshiva University, yeah. At that time, the Palestinian people were denied from the right to self-determination, and the Zionist gangs in an ethnic cleansing campaign against the Palestinian people aimed at expelling them from their lands and areas. Okay, now they're talking about, are they talking about 1948 at this point, okay?
So, gang sounds very Vanessa Redgrave.
Yeah, well, it certainly doesn't make them sound like good guys, that's for sure. Yeah, okay, so they seized control here, right? So this is so this was a planned operation. 1948 was somehow a planned operation to depopulate the land, systematically depopulate the land of Palestinians, which of course we know is absurd, even though depopulation did happen. It was a product of war. Over these long decades, the Palestinian people suffered all forms of oppression, injustice, expropriation of their fundamental rights, and the apartheid policies. This is actually not translated too well. You know, the English is not great in here. They're hitting on the right terms that'll appeal to Westerners, but the English is lacking. They should have ran it through ChatGPT before they published it.
I don't know. I think this whole thing was written by ChatGPT.
It could have been,
yeah,
or at least the woke version of ChatGPT.
Yeah.
I think I did it back about a year ago. I plugged into ChatGPT a question about Israeli self-determination or Jewish self-determination and Palestinian self-determination and the land and all that. It came up with a response that was far more favorable to the Zionists. I wonder, and I posted it on Facebook at the time. Now, the interesting here, I also want to point out, and it came up earlier, and I forgot to mention it, when they use the word dignity, right? They use the word dignity, injustice, and fundamental rights. They're speaking the language of the Enlightenment, right? They're not talking purely in Islamic terms here. They know what are the buzzwords and have been the buzzwords for hundreds of years in the West, beginning with the Enlightenment. And that's what, the American Revolution was about in many respects. It was about.
I mean, the fundamental rights is not even an Islamic concept. It's not a Jewish concept either, biblically.
No, this is all Enlightenment rhetoric, Enlightenment and post-Enlightenment rhetoric. So again, they know how to play to Western audiences. The Gaza Strip, for example, suffered as of 2007 from a suffocating blockade. Okay, so here we go. We go from 1948, 67, 2007. Where's the Second Intifada? Where's the fact that you were blowing up thousands of Jews? Where is the winning of an election, having a civil war with the PLO, and then taking over Gaza, and then vowing to wipe Israel off the map, and then having a blockade launched? It's completely glossed over.
Very selective. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so the blockade is a product of 1948 or a product of 1917, right? It's seen in those terms. 17 years, the world's largest open air prison in the world. That's Western rhetoric as well. I think they clearly took that from the West. I've never heard Arabs use that word in the Middle East. The people in Gaza in 2018 also initiated the Great March of Return demonstrations to peacefully protest the Israeli blockade. Were those entirely peaceful?
What's that?
Were those entirely peaceful? The Great March of 2018. Remember all summer they were marching?
No.
Yeah. Didn't they try to ram the blockade and tear it down?
Of course. Yeah.
All right.
And also, there's a blockade on the other side, on the other border too, and that's not mentioned here.
No, of course not. Of course not. So this Great March of Return, and again, the word return sort of implies that they want to come over the border, and
they do mention the other side, though, when they talk about the border crossings, that apparently Israel has bombed. But other than that, there's no mention of the Egyptian side.
Yeah, but see here, the problem here is that they're claiming that this is peaceful, okay? And even at the time, the majority of the people standing there were peaceful. The problem here is the word return. I mean, the implication here is that they're taking back the homes they lost in 1948, right? So this isn't any sort of peaceful march. This is about home invasion. And given the events of October 7th, it's pretty clear that once they got across the border, they were not going to be peaceful, right? We could read back into the past. This isn't that long ago. This is 5 years earlier.
I don't remember that being peaceful at all.
No, of course not. No, it was violent, and Israel had to, crush it, especially when they managed to get across the fences, and then they had weapons with them. No, so complete bullshit. According to official figures, yada yada yada, January 2023, Israeli occupation, blah 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 blah. Unfortunately, the U.S. administration and its allies did not pay attention to the suffering of the Palestinian people over the past years, but provided cover to the Israeli aggression. Well, I suppose it depends on who was in the White House at the time, but I can certainly remember harsh criticism coming out of the White House. I mean, admittedly, the United States, didn't do much, and we relied on them for vetoing things at the UN. So I guess that's partly true to a certain extent, right? Minus, words like aggression and whatnot. But admittedly, if it were not for the U.S., Israel would have a problem, at least at international organizations like the United Nations. More of a problem than they already do.
But also, if this document was not aimed at the Western audience, why would there need to be any mention of the U.S. administration?
There wouldn't
And
be.
it's out.
Yeah, in fact, it would be more of their interest to put the blame entirely on Israelis or Jews. They say later on the problem's not with the Jews, but when Palestinians refer to Israelis, they use the word Yahud. So they don't distinguish between Jews and Israelis, even when they claim that they do. So this is clearly, again, an audience directed, a document directed at people at colleges like Harvard and Reed and Cornell and Rutgers and such places. The Israeli violations, and this is funny, and brutality were documented by many UN organizations. So does that mean the UNRWA was documenting it? I mean, how could they're documenting operations that they're participating in?
Yeah, well, there are other UN organizations that I guess were documenting it.
Do you trust them?
No, I've never trusted any UN organization.
Yeah, and I don't trust Amnesty International. I think they're a pain in the ass. Let alone Human Rights Watch. I mean, they're off the charts. Yeah. Okay, well, I highlighted the good points. Okay, here we go. Peace process. You asked about peace process, Adam. There's something to be said here. As for the quote, peaceful settlement process, so it's in quotation marks, which suggests that Israel was acting in bad faith.
And by the way, periods go inside quote marks.
Yeah, and ChatGPT knows that, so I don't think ChatGPT wrote this. Despite the fact that the Oslo Accord signed in 1993 with the PLO stipulated the establishment of a Palestinian independent state, which is not true. They did not state what the final status would be in the document. In fact,
well, it did say that that there would be a projected independent Palestinian state by 2013.
It said that in the original Oslo in the first 19.
It might have been the second.
I think it was in the second one because Oslo 1 was successful because they kept the really divisive issues. They didn't discuss the fate of Jerusalem. They didn't even really discuss the fate of the settlements, and they didn't discuss what a Palestinian entity there would be a Palestinian entity, but whether it would be a completely sovereign state or not, they kind of left that vague. And that was the only way both people would sign it.
Might have been the 1995 Accords then.
Oh, there were more accords in 95?
The second one, this is Oslo 2.
Oh, okay. Oh, I thought Oslo 2 was Camp David. There was one in between?
No, Camp David was 2000.
Yeah, I know that. So there was another set of accords in 95. Okay,
Yeah,
that was separate and distinct. Okay, all right. Independence in the West Bank and Gaza Strip. Israel, in quotation marks. So much for peace and recognition. Israel systematically destroyed every possibility to establish the Palestinian state through a wide campaign of settlements, construction, and Judaization of the Palestinian lands in the occupied West Bank and Jerusalem. Now, this is a statement right here that many college professors in Jewish studies would actually agree with, and I could name them off the top of my head. I'm not going to, but shout out to certain people. You know who you are if you're watching us, and I'm sure you don't watch us. But yeah, no, this is obviously not true. They're glossing over the Second Intifada in its entirety, right? And
Why would Jewish settlements completely destroy any possibility of a Palestinian state?
well, I suppose the existing settlements wouldn't, because they were existing when Oslo was signed. But again,
Why would future ones destroy that possibility?
because you're expanding into territory that's going to be allotted to the Palestinian state, right?
Why can't there be Jews there?
Well, there can be, but they should be the immigration in there should probably stop at the time that the statement is signed. If you've designated area for a Palestinian state, you probably still shouldn't be settling Jews through various incentives to go there. I have a big problem with the expansion of settlements post 19.
Well, why can't you just say to them, look, if we cede this territory over to a Palestinian state, you're now going to become citizens of the Palestinian state.
Okay, what happens if it takes 30 years and by that point the Jews are a numerical demographic majority in the future Palestinian state?
Have you looked at a map and seen just how much of the West Bank these settlements take up?
Yeah, I get that, but also think about the percentage of the Jewish population before 1948 compared to after 1948. I mean, there can be
Well, that's only
cataclysmic events.
because of mass immigration, right? In the millions, there's no possibility of mass immigration in the millions moving to the settlements. The only possibility would be if the Haredim start moving there, which isn't going to happen.
Or if there's a war and like in 1948, the Palestinians get depopulated and end up in refugee camps on the other side of the border.
If there is a war, then you've completely lost any chance of a Palestinian state anyway. So it's hardly the settlements that are in the way of that happening.
Well, you know, after the borders were drawn in 1949, there was no reason to stop them from declaring a state in West Bank and
The
Gaza.
Oslo Accords do not say that the entire West Bank is going to be Palestinian at some point.
You're absolutely correct about that. But in the mind of the Palestinian negotiators, they expected all of 67, and that's what they always said publicly.
Not happening.
And of course, it's not happening. But that's not the point. That's what their position is, and that's why Oslo didn't discuss it.
They're not putting settlements into Area A.
Yeah, I know that, but the Palestinians, you know, the distinction between these different areas was convenient for the signing of the document, but that's not what the Palestinians believe. Even the two-staters among the Palestinians, if there are any at this point, or at least at the time, for them it was 67. They weren't going to relinquish anything unless it involved territorial swapping.
Right? All right, well, if they have a problem with all this, then come back to the table and try to work out another agreement, an Oslo 3, something, or at least don't walk away from the Second Camp David Accords.
Absolutely, and between 2002 and 2009, they should have done that, and you know they tried. Olmert tried, but obviously under Bibi, it's not happening. Like Bibi's not going to sit down with them, right? I mean, with all due respect to,
but if there was a very good chance that the Palestinians were going to negotiate in good faith, there would be no Bibi. The Israelis would elect a more left-wing government to see that happens.
Maybe. I don't think that's
the right wing is the movement of the Israeli electorate to the right is in reaction to the Palestinian aggression. If the Palestinians would just stop with their hostility, then Israel's government would probably be more left-wing.
Okay, but bear in mind that the separation barrier, the fence, or the apartheid wall, or whatever the hell you want to call it, that was built pre-Bibi, right? Bibi takes credit. He claims credit for stopping the terrorism, and it was not him. It was Sharon. Sharon built the wall, and he deserves credit for stopping the terrorism, right?
Yeah, well, but Bibi was also largely responsible for the disengagement from Gaza
because he was in his government, right?
Government. Bibi has always been very good at speaking out of both sides of his mouth, doing one thing and then saying the other.
I don't think the perpetuation of Bibi's rule has been totally about the conflict. I think he's been good for Israel's economy, and I think
that's been a big factor. But the fact that he is committed to the status quo does seem to conform to the mood of Israeli society that wants the status quo.
Absolutely.
They're not interested.
No, I agree with that for sure.
Because the Palestinians are not interested in making peace.
Yeah. And the Second Intifada, I think, really.
If the Israelis had a peace partner, then Israel's government would not be run by Bibi, and certainly would not have any of the religious Zionists in it.
Maybe. I don't know. I can't answer that. You're the political scientist. And I don't predict the future, and we don't ask factual questions in history.
No, I think that you would have had back when Herzog ran under the Zionist Union banner back in oh, I don't remember what year it was, like 2013, something like that. You know, there would have been he would have won had there been a good faith effort on the part of the Palestinians. If the Israeli voters really saw that they had peace partners to work with, they would have elected a government that would try to negotiate. But
Bibi also kept them out of any major war, and that's another factor. Except for 2014, that was the closest that came to being. I mean,
and now,
well, yeah, but now this was a game changer, obviously. So his strategy ended up failing, given
and also remember that there's always wars during these peace agreements. The terrorism escalates.
Absolutely, for sure. Which is why Hamas was founded in 87, 88, when it was clear the PLO was starting to move in the direction of talking to Israel. Right? I mean, that's the reason for their founding. And immediately after Oslo, there was an uptick in terrorism. And, you know, in fairness, we have to say there was an uptick in Israeli terrorism as well. Right? So the radicals on both sides wanted to sabotage.
Well, I mean, you know, the Rabin was assassinated during the.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, this is interesting here. After 75 years of relentless occupation and suffering, blah, 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 blah. What did the world expect from the Palestinian people to do in response to the following, right? So, I mean, it's not suggesting that, it's basically saying that Hamas is the spokespeople for the Palestinians. And I guess here it differs from what some in the West will say, who claim that Hamas is oppressing the Palestinian people. Of course, on campus today, we see a lot of pro-Hamas people, so maybe that's not the case.
You didn't underline after failing all initiatives for liberation. We just talked about them. What are they? What initiatives? Did they fail?
Violent liberation.
What's that?
So wait, after whose initiatives for liberation? There's no subject in the sentence.
After 75 years of relentless occupation and suffering, and after failing all initiatives for liberation and return to our people.
Well, who failed? The Israelis or the Palestinians?
I don't know. I'm just reading that, or I did in my cursory reading, to mean that after all initiatives fell through to liberate them.
All right. It's a very.
And what does that mean, to return to our people?
Yeah.
I don't get it.
Initiatives for liberation and return to our people. That makes no sense. Bad English. Boy, they had a lousy translator. They probably had some graduate students do the translation for them. No offense to all graduate students. There are some who are, you know, very good writers out there. What did they expect?
It's written like one of these legal documents that are written up by the sovereign citizens, you know, that go into court and use this kind of pseudo legal language.
Yeah, and there was no competent lawyer who would allow a document like this to pass. My father,
right.
Regarding the fact that the entire thing's a lie, just in terms of its precision, its discursive precision, it fails miserably. So, you know, okay, they're saying the Palestinian response. So I wrote behind October 7th here, but that's not exactly what they're talking about. They're not talking about October 7th, so fair enough. Maybe I was jumping the gun there a bit. The Israeli Judaization plans to the Blessed Al-Aqsa Mosque, its temporal and spatial division attempts, as well as the intensification of Israeli settlers' incursions into the Holy Mosque. What has Israel done to the Temple Mount?
Well, I mean, there have been they have allowed temporarily Jewish prayer up at the Temple Mount, but I mean,
why is that wrong?
I don't think so. I don't think it's wrong.
And that's not Judaization. They didn't stop the Muslims from praying.
Plus the fact that the Al-Aqsa Mosque is under the control of the Jordanian government.
Yeah.
Not Israel.
Yeah, it's under the control of the Waqf or whatever that guy's called. Yeah, no, it's the status quo. They left the status quo in place from the Ottoman era, as much in Jerusalem is, right? The Church of the whatever that's in Jerusalem is still divided by confession, Christian confession, according to how the Ottomans allotted it in the 1830s or 40s, right? So, you know, Israel hasn't been Judaizing the temple.
What in the world? What did the world expect from the Palestinian people to do in response to the Israeli Judaization plans to the Blessed Al-Aqsa Mosque? Well, the answer to that is that there hasn't been Israeli Judaization. So
Yeah.
we can scratch that off the list. Next, let's see if they have something better to come up with here.
Practice of the extremist right-wing Israeli government, which is practically taking steps towards annexing the entire West Bank and
They
Jerusalem.
dropped the annexation plan when they made an agreement with the UAE in the Abraham Accords.
Okay, but it was on the table for a while.
It was on the table, but I really believe, though, that I mean, I don't have evidence of it, but I tend to think that, you know, Netanyahu promoted that as kind of a bargaining chip with the Gulf states.
Could be. It makes sense. I don't think he would have gone through with annexation. I really
I don't
don't
think
think.
so
Yeah,
either.
he's not bold enough to take a step like that.
Mhm.
I don't think he would do it. The thousands of Palestinian detainees in Israeli jails who are experiencing deprivation of their quote basic rights as
All
well.
right, so there's terrorists in Israeli jails.
Yeah.
And they're also being given their fundamental needs like food and water and a you know medicine and a basic standard of living.
Mhm.
The quality of life for terrorists in Israeli prisons vastly exceeds the quality of life that Hamas is affording their own innocent people in Gaza. So I'm not exactly sure what they're getting at here.
Note they use the word fascist, which I don't think is a term in Islamic vocabulary. So this is clearly a Western import again, probably written by you know, either David Myers or maybe Joshua Shanes down at Charleston, or Mira Sukharov or one of those people. They probably consulted them on the best. Omer Bartov, he's an expert on the subject.
Have there been any exposés of these prisons by Human Rights Watch or Amnesty?
There's a lot of video that circulates that claim the Palestinians are suffering severe torture in there. I don't know. I looked at
Maybe there's some of it. I don't know.
well, yeah, of course it's possible. I mean, you know, the United States used torture in Iraq and other places. I'm not going to, you know, let's be honest here. Governments do this, right? It's not unheard of, and they're subject to military law. They're not subject to the same legal system that Arab citizens of Israel are.
I mean, but they're probably not doing that to every prisoner.
I'm
Just
sure
want
not.
to have information that they need to gather intel. I don't know.
I had Tamimi. What's her last name? I had Tamimi. Is that her name? She came out looking okay. The one who was arrested for slapping the cop.
Mhm.
Yeah, we don't need to go through all these. These are basically the same. But I mean, again, it's the refugee camps, and you know, there's grains of truth in all of this. Grains, right? They're able to, you know, isolate the ones that are.
What about the quality of life in Gaza and how the Gazans are being mistreated?
Well, it's the Israeli government doing it. That's their claim.
That's their so basically when they kill homosexuals
Who are not mentioned in this document. Their intersectionality didn't seem to. I was waiting for, where are the queers for Palestine? Why aren't you mentioning them? You know, because they were heading in that direction at various points when they're bringing up intersectional social justice by talking about the colonized peoples of the world. They didn't mention African Americans either. I was so sure they were going to do that. But yeah, so no, of course they're not going to accept the blame for anything. They're not going to say, okay, yeah, you know, we throw the gays off the roof, but that's okay. They're obviously not going to say that. It's all because of Israel. Any terror that happens in Gaza is a product of the occupation. What was expected for the Palestinian people after all that? Boy, this is like a Haggadah. They keep asking the same questions over and over, you know? It could in many ways be a Jewish document. Proceeding from the above, Operation Al-Aqsa Flood on October 7th was a necessary, I love the word necessary here, step and a normal response to confront all Israeli, and again, conspiracies, let's get into anti-Semitic territory here, against the Palestinian people and their cause. Okay, this is really, really a problematic sentence, okay? First, the word necessary. And as a historian, we always like to, you know, discuss what necessary means in a particular historical context. Was Hitler necessary? He was probably necessary to carry out the Holocaust. Was he necessary to make Germany great again? Probably, yeah. I mean, he had these ideas, and it took a man like him to actually implement them. There's no value judgments in making a statement like that. So it's a good term that historians, use. But in this case, it's necessary for what? Necessary for the liberation of Palestine. Like that was going to, all that was a mass atrocity, which traumatized and killed 1,200 Jews. It didn't advance the liberation of their movement.
It
So
caused Israel's retaliation, right?
yeah.
So all they're doing is killing their own people. So how is that
Yeah.
a necessary step in a normal response?
Well, they think their own people are expendable. I mean, that's the concept behind
A
suicide
necessary
bombing.
step in a normal response is try to make peace.
See,
Make
that's the
peace.
that's the problem when they keep throwing in words like dignity and all that. It implies that they care about the individual, and they don't, right? Individual rights and dignity is entirely a Western idea. It had just my own area of study or research, Russia. That idea doesn't exist. It's the good of the collective. Though in Russia, it's been done under either a communist guise or under, love of the czar or whatnot, or today Putin, right? They don't care about the lives of the individual, and they sacrifice millions of their own to achieve their very misguided ends. And that's the same with the Islamic resistance. I mean, martyrdom. They're going to a better place. They're willing to sacrifice their lives. It's not about dignity. They're using Western terms here that have absolutely no application here. Even though, of course, people, their supporters in the West like to frame it in such terms. So normal, I also have a problem with the word normal. Okay, so it's normal if you are in contested territory and, under blockade to go and brutally rape and behead and massacre 1,400 people and kidnap them. That's their definition of normal. That's not good. Is it normal? Is that how all colonized peoples have reacted throughout history? Maybe some have. I mean, obviously, in places like Vietnam and Cambodia, but I mean, on the whole, I don't think that's really how an anti-colonial rebellion, takes place. And of course, there's the Israeli, conspiracies. And, once you throw the word conspiracies in there, there's no conspiracy against the Palestinians, right? There's an ethnic conflict, and Israel's doing what it believes it needs to do to contain and win this ethnic conflict, which of course involves violence. But it's not a conspiracy. They're wide open about what they're planning to do. Right? There's no secrets here. Certainly no conspiracy. All right, this is great. This is the important section here. If you guys are still with us, Adam, you were right. This was going to be a long one. The events of Operation Al-Aqsa flood and responses to the Israeli allegations. Little loaded title right there. We in the Islamic resistance movement. Okay, so they're still defining themselves as an Islamic resistance movement, and we really need to underscore that because people like to say, oh, their 2017 charter really negates some of the harsh stuff in the original charter, which is all about Islam coupled with European anti-Semitic conspiracy theories. So they're still retaining that Islamic resistance movement pretense, much as Islamic Jihad is still literally called Islamic Jihad. So they're not only implicating all of the Palestinian people, they're basically implicating the entire Islamic world. What, 1.2 billion people or so, Muslims in the world? Maybe it's more than that at this point. Operation Al-Aqsa flood on October 7th targeted the Israeli military sites and sought to arrest the enemy's soldiers to pressure on the Israeli authorities to release the thousands of Palestinians held in Israeli jails through a prisoner exchange deal. Okay, where's the problem here?
Because they're targeting civilians as well as soldiers.
I can't even believe this needs to be addressed.
It's true that soldiers were targeted, but
absolutely, why would they? They're going to target people with guns. They're not going to not do that. Yeah. No, this was a terrorist attack against women and children, which included rape. Which
go down to number two. Go down to number two.
Yeah.
Avoid harm to civilians, especially children, women, and elderly people. There's civilians, there's children, there's babies in hostage over there in Gaza.
One of them just died a few days ago.
Exactly. There are reports that they put babies inside ovens and burn them alive.
Has that been substantiated?
That was at one of the kibbutzes.
Okay, well, we know the mass rape took place. That has been fully substantiated.
They even photographed and took videos of these acts of torture.
This is a religious and moral commitment. Now, I'm not an Islamophobe by any means whatsoever, and all the Muslim people I know are good people, but they're making a claim here that their actions on October 7th are in accord with the theological principles of Islam, the morality of Islam. And, it's very hard for me to respond to that without sounding racist against Muslims, because they're basically saying what they did is in accord with Islam. Just as the Crusaders in the 1090s will say what they did was in accord with Christian principles. Okay, and we have no problem today condemning the Christianity of the 11th century.
What is this picture here on the left?
I don't know.
Is that supposed to be an Israeli soldier being held captive by one of their by a terrorist?
This looks like from an episode of The Twilight Zone. Could it have been lifted from that?
No, it doesn't look like a Twilight.
Oh, maybe it's from the little people. One of the giant. Did you see the episode of the little?
Yeah, that could be. Yeah.
One of the giant guys like reaching down and he has a look on his face before he's stomped to death.
Yeah.
Okay, so they're fans of the Twilight Zone too. That's another thing we've established. Okay, I guess that's okay. They must have cable or something.
I find this to be a confusing picture for this purpose.
It really is. Maybe it's art. Maybe we're not supposed to be art critics here. We reiterate that the Palestinian movement was fully disciplined and committed to the Islamic during the operation. Again, that's like the Crusaders going up the Rhineland. They were a disciplined army of fighting for Christendom. Committed to the Islamic values during the operation, that the Palestinian fighters only targeted the occupation soldiers, okay, and those who carried weapons against our people. That's obviously not true. Though, of course, some people in the kibbutzes had weapons. I doubt those people massacred at that concert were armed to the teeth. This is not the United States where every second person's walking around with a gun. So yeah, okay, so this is an outright lie. I put an LOL here for a reason. In the meantime, the Palestinian fighters were keen to avoid harming civilians. They keep saying this, despite the fact that the resistance does not possess precise weapons. Okay, now let me ask you something. Does this mean that they raped people by accident? That they were trying to do something else, but it ended up becoming rape? Do you need more?
I don't know.
If they had precise weapons, rape wouldn't have transpired? Because that's how I'm reading this. In addition, if there was any case of targeting civilians, it happened accidentally, and in the course of the
I honestly have no idea how anyone could believe this.
Well, there are people in ethnic studies departments and Middle Eastern studies programs who do, and will swear by this.
Simple Google search, and you'll find.
Fucking Mark Lamont Hill would write a document like this. Okay.
Do a simple Google search you'll get evidence to the contrary.
Well, Google's a part of the global Jewish conspiracy, so it was founded by Russian Jews.
Videos though of them performing these acts of atrocities against
videos can be faked, like the videos of the gas chambers. We've heard David Irving do this before. All right, fake photos. Since its establishment in okay, here's where we get great stuff here. Since the establishment in 87, the Hamas movement committed itself to avoiding harm to civilians. Okay, what year was their charter? 1988. Okay, their charter was from 1988. And they're saying only after Zionist criminal Baruch Goldstein in 94 committed a massacre against Palestinian worshippers, which we all condemn, which is reprehensible in every respect. As a Jew, I condemn it. Worshippers in the Al Ibrahimi Mosque in occupied Hebron City, the Hamas movement announced an initiative to avoid civilians. They're still claiming to avoid civilians in the brunt of fighting by all parties. But the Israeli occupation rejected it. Did they reject some sort of overture from Hamas in 94?
Not that I'm aware of. They don't even listen to Hamas.
And even did not give any comment on it. Yeah, that's right. Israel had no reason to comment on anything Hamas says. The Hamas movement also repeated such calls several times, blah, 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 deaf here. Now here, I'm just going to put up on the screen for 1 second here. This is the Hamas covenant of 1988. Okay, now, again, as I've said repeatedly, I'm no Mr. Trigonometry here, but 94 came after 88, and this is the covenant of the movement where they're talking about Jews trying to control the world, and they're talking about killing every Jew behind every rock or tree or whatever it was. But, this is, one of the most anti-Semitic documents ever written. So I don't think they actually committed themselves to anything peaceful in 1988. Yeah, no. So here, yeah, this is not really a document that's peace in intention. We need not go through this because it's well known to people. Right. Maybe some faults happened during Operation Al-Aqsa Mosque's implementation due to the rapid collapse of the Israeli security and military system and the chaos
Maybe,
caused.
maybe
Now,
it's possible.
but if hold on, if the Israeli military collapsed, that would have given Hamas more of an ability to be organized and systematic in what they were doing, right? They weren't trying to deal with people committed to making war, like the Nazis invading Russia, where there were people who were going to, massacre any German that they got their hands on.
Yeah, so there wouldn't be faults happening then.
Yeah, no, it's not. Yeah, okay, so that's bullshit. What the Israeli occupation promoted on allegations that the Al-Qassam brigades on October 7th did were targeting Israeli civilians are nothing but complete lies and fabrications. Okay, so the Israelis lie, right? Which is nothing new to hear. We've heard this before. This is Hasbara, but it dates from an earlier period. I remember
This whole document is a lie.
yeah, absolutely. There was one German student, it was published in a German newspaper in a university to stop Jewish, obviously a completely different scenario here, but from Jews assimilating into German culture. And it said, when the Jews write in German, the Jews lie. It's because it's not the essence of their soul. So we have been marked as liars. The Israeli official narrative, at least they're sticking to the word narrative, so we'll give them some credit for that. It has also been firmly refuted the lie that 40 beheaded babies. They beheaded babies. This is fact. I don't know if it was 40. I don't know if they ever got an exact number, but they certainly beheaded babies. Now, this is funny. The suggestion that the Palestinian fighters committed rape against Israeli women, not that rape's funny, I'm not trying to say that, was fully denied, including by the Hamas movement. Okay, well, they denied committing rape. Have you ever seen anyone on trial for rape admit to having done it? No. Okay, and a report by Mondo Vice, easily the most anti-Semitic newspaper that claims to be a Jewish publication. It was founded by a Jew. News website on December 1st, among others, said there was a lack of any evidence of mass rape. Okay, now Mondo Vice is basically a mouthpiece for Hamas and other groups. So the investigation conducted was an investigation by themselves, which probably wasn't even an actual investigation. Okay, so we have problems here. I don't think we need to go through these other things here. Okay, this is very key, and it sort of refutes some earlier statements, or justifies earlier statements, or sheds light on earlier statements. When speaking about Israeli civilians, it must be known that conscription applies to all Israelis above the age of 18, males who served 32 months of military service and females are 24, where all can carry and use arms. This is based on the Israeli security theory of an armed people, which turned the Israeli entity into an army with a country attached. Okay, so my reading of this, among other readings, is that there's no such thing as civilians. Now, if there's no such thing as civilians, then the people they targeted who were civilians aren't actually civilians, which means that they're correct in saying that they didn't target civilians. It's, and I heard on the BBC, they interviewed a Hamas spokesperson shortly after October 7th. And they said, okay, well, you're trying to liberate Palestine and fight the occupiers. How do you justify, murdering a woman living in territory that's internationally recognized Israeli territory? And he said, they're all settlers, right? So this is clearly, contrary to their claims about willing to accept 1967 borders, that's obviously not true, right? If they consider people in the regions of Tel Aviv as being settlers and legitimate targets because they are not civilians, right? They're militarized, military personnel, and they're settlers. Okay, so that's sort of their get out of jail free card there in certain respects. A transparent international investigation, which we've allegedly seen in progress this month with the International Criminal, what's it called? The International Criminal?
The International Court of Justice.
International Court of Justice, right. We urge these countries, especially the US administration, Germany, Canada, and the UK, if they are meant for justice to prevail, as they claim, they ought to announce their support for the cause of the investigation and all crimes committed in occupied Palestine and give full support for the international courts to effectively do their job. So Hamas wants to be part of the international community, it seems, and that explains some of their choice of language in here.
And if they want investigations in all parts of occupied Palestine, then we have to investigate Hamas's crimes.
Well, I don't think the International Court of Justice did that.
No.
So here they're talking about the ICJ. So this was written before the outcome of that. The events of October 7th must be put in a broader context, and that all cases of struggle against colonialism and occupation in our contemporary time be evoked. These experiences struggles show that in the same level of oppression committed by the occupier, there would be an equivalent response by the people under occupation. Now, this is a statement right out of Mark Lamont Hill. He basically said as much on CNN that we cannot deny the Palestinians their violent tactics that we have respected for other liberation movements. And I'm not sure we've actually respected them for all liberation movements, perhaps some of them, depending on the country. But that's basically what it's saying.
So what are they asking Israel to do?
Is there an actual section on what they're expecting from Israel, or is Israel basically completely written out of the equation? We'll see if we come to that. There might.
What are they expecting anyone to do?
They're expecting other people to uphold international norms, which allegedly means the liberation and the establishment of a Palestinian state.
All right, so what exactly does that mean for Israel?
Israel, well, it depends which document of theirs you read. It depends on who is speaking.
Does it mean 1967 borders? Does it mean 1948 borders, so Jews just have to leave? Or does it mean the extermination of all world Jewry? Like, what does it mean exactly?
Well, if it's Palestine, will be free from the river to the sea, and they do set those as the boundaries of Palestine, even in their moderate, quote, moderate 2017 document, then no, it's not the 1967 borders. That's not true. Does it mean genocide? I think so, but I guess it's ambiguous enough where it might not mean genocide, but it certainly doesn't mean the perpetuation of any sort of Jewish state, even if they claim.
Well, they don't, because this is written for a Western audience, they're not actually saying what it is that they want.
Yeah, no, they can't. They can't. They absolutely can't. Well, then again, after some of the protests of October 7th, maybe they can. Right? I mean, there are.
I don't think enough people in the West, despite what you saw in those protests, would be influenced by what they actually want.
Yeah. Yeah, no, you're right.
You use buzzwords like colonization, colonialism, or occupation,
Dignity,
indignity, injustice,
yeah,
oppression, things like that. But I think most people are interested in getting down to the bottom line, right? And looking beyond those buzzwords. Those buzzwords may work with college students that are very what do you call it? Very idealistic. Those kinds of buzzwords.
Yeah, but it works with college professors too.
It works with college professors as well because they're very idealistic.
They're worse than the students many times.
But yeah, they're worse than the students. But it doesn't work with practical people, with practically minded people who want to actually see what is it that on the ground is the suffering of the Palestinian people that they keep talking about.
Yeah, and remember, we're not talking about the PLO here. We're talking about Hamas. I mean, that
exactly right. So what exactly is it that they're asking for?
Well, I mean, they want to liberate Palestine and confront the Zionist project. Its frame of reference is Islam. So again, they have to keep repeating that, which determines its principles, objectives, and means. Hamas rejects the persecution of any human being or the undermining of his or her rights on nationalist, religious, or sectarian grounds. Okay, religious, fine. If they want to go back to medieval Islam, then yeah, the Jews were respected. But
they're for the persecution of Jewish nationalists.
Yes, absolutely. And they say here, so this is a lie. They're not going to respect Jewish nationalism because Jewish nationalism has no rights according to them.
Right. Yeah.
Which is essentially the party line in academia anyway. So, there's no rights for Jewish nationalism because Jews with power are anathema.
Also, I thought that the nationalism is always bad. If you ask a lot of these anti-Zionists who claim to be anti-nationalists wherever nationalism exists, that they're not just picking on Jewish nationalism.
Not all of them will say that.
No, but some of them will say that, right?
Yeah, some of them will.
Those that will say that, right? How do they account for this statement here?
They can't, but they'd have to read this particular sentence here. But again, you know, if you're saying that Zionists are European colonizers, then the Jews aren't a nation. They're a fragmented people, and therefore there should be no such thing as Jewish nationalism. You could have diaspora nationalism that applies to Eastern Europe. You could argue that they were like a Yiddish-speaking nation, you know, stuck in the middle of Ukraine, and that was their homeland. I think the Ukrainians would disagree on that, and they did violently at times. But no, they don't believe in this idea of diasporic nationhood. And the first PLO charter said as much. Jews are a religious group. Moses Mendelssohn would have agreed with that in the 1780s. We're just a religion. We're not a nation anymore. The Reform movement would have agreed with that in the 1880s. Not the rest of this document, but, well, maybe some of them. But who knows? Hamas affirms, okay, here we have woke speak, affirms that its conflict is with the Zionist project, not with the Jews because of their religion. Hamas does not wage a struggle against the Jews because they are Jewish, but wages a struggle against the Zionists who occupy
Not
Palestine.
according to their covenant from 88.
Yeah, absolutely. 88 is it's global Jewry according to their 88
And
covenant.
you know what? I don't care if they updated it. I don't care if they changed it. They said it once.
Yeah.
Right? If they're going to update it, you can't just cancel what they said before.
But they didn't even cancel it.
No, they didn't.
If they said we negate this, I mean, the PLO, well, Arafat proved the lie in the end that it was a lie. But I mean, they did renounce terrorism at one point, and it was sufficient for Rabin and company to sit down with them. But Hamas didn't even do that. It was a supplementary document of sorts.
One thing to renounce a tactic that was once used to change their mind as to the approach that they're going to take. But you can't change your mind when it comes to who you identify as the enemy. So first they say that the enemy is the Jew, and now they're saying the enemy is the Zionist.
Mhm.
No, you said it first. It's the Jew, right? We know what you mean.
And I will point out again that in Arabic, at least spoken in Palestine, they do not distinguish between Israeli Zionist and Jew. It's all Yahud, right? Which is Jew in Arabic. Okay, and even our friend Sukharov basically had to admit that she couldn't argue her way out of it. Yeah, so you're right. You know, in terms of tactical change and all that, I mean, I'll hold up the case of the IRA as a good example where peace was ultimately achieved. And of course, he had a breakaway faction that refused to accept a peaceful approach to the solution. But, you know, that's over in the British Isles where they had a revolution in the 1600s and gradually worked their way to a democratic political culture, which is obviously not the case over here. So their definition of what Zionism is essentially the same as the woke on college campuses. Palestinian people have always stood against oppression, injustice. I don't even know what that means. And the committing of massacres against civilians, which is not true, regardless of who commit them. Committing of massacres against civilians, regardless of who commit them. So that means they're condemning their own people who've massacred the Jews.
And then based on religious and moral value, on our religious and moral values, we clearly stated our rejection to what the Jews were exposed to by the Nazi Germany. Well, all right, so are they now to the left then of Abbas, who literally wrote a dissertation on, promoting Holocaust denial?
This is a leftist document, okay, except for some certain words here and there. This is a woke document, okay? This could have been produced and can be taught in certain departments in the United States, and those professors will likely get away with it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I mean, I would assign it in class, but I'm not sure what category to put it under. I wouldn't put it under anti-Semitism. It would have to be, lies against the Jews or something like that. But I mean, it is worth reading, as a fabrication. I'd probably teach it in the same unit that I teach Holocaust denial in a class, along with what the AJS published last year at Gaza Ghetto. The whole thing, flows nice. All of it flows nicely into each other. Yeah, that the Jewish problem, here we remind that the Jewish people in essence was a European problem, while the Arab and Islamic environment was across history a safe haven to the Jewish people and other people's belief in ethnicities. Now, yeah, that's true for the Middle Ages, and that's really true up until approximately the year 1800. There were massive
of Jews from those Arabic countries.
That's what I was going to mention.
Mid-20th century.
Yeah. So no Iraq, Egypt, Libya, Yemen. They were not safe havens for the Jews. There's 750,000 Jews who could have attested to that, and they're the ones who ironically brought Likud to power at the end of the day. They were brutalized and massacred, and worse, they were blamed for Zionism, right? This is what you call conscripting people into a nationalist movement that they were not part of. They had no interest in Zionism, right? They are genuine victims of the Arab-Israeli conflict and of Arab persecution of Jews in the name of Palestine, because they were allegedly occupiers, even though they had nothing to do with the people in Israel. And they didn't want to. I mean, they weren't Zionists, not at all. I mean, maybe some of them were, but the majority of them were, especially in places like Yemen, where they're incredibly traditional. I mean, they're not. Nationalism is a European ideology, and eventually the Arabs adopted it in the early 20th century. And, even in Iraq in the early 20th century, there was an attempt to create a civic Iraq identity, not an Arab identity, but an Iraqi identity that included all the peoples who were citizens of Iraq. It failed miserably, but, Nazis came to power in Iraq in the 1930s. But there was a very brief attempt at it. But no, then they all got expelled in the end. So that's bullshit. The Hamas movement, according to international laws and norms, is a national liberation movement that has clear goals and missions. Well, I think they do have clear goals and missions, but I don't think that's in accord with any international laws. What are they basing that on? Is there an international body that has said that Hamas is a legitimate movement of national self-determination? Not the Palestinians, Hamas. Have they gotten any recognition from an international organization?
No.
What about the Arab League? Do they even recognize them?
I don't think so.
Yeah, they don't. I mean, whenever they have a Palestinian there, it's presumably from the PLO.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, this is not good. Rights against the longest and brutalist colonial occupation. Okay, I can make a list. If we're going to call this a colonial occupation, let's call it that for a second. I'll make a list of about 12 colonial occupations, globally speaking, even just in the modern world. Forget about going back to earlier centuries, where the Arabs occupied millions of people who were not Arabs or Muslims and forcibly converted those who were pagans. And Christians did too, and whoever else. But you know what? They lasted a hell of a lot longer than 75 years in the middle, or 105 years in the Middle East. Right. Okay. So another outright law. The Palestinians have it worse.
All right. What is needed? This is the part I'm interested in.
Okay. All right. Well, here, can you read it? You want to read? Can you see?
Have any nation been liberated from occupation without struggle, resistance, or sacrifice? Well, first of all, it has any nation, but that's a minor grammatical problem here. All right. Are they? So it's a rhetorical question.
Yeah, with the answer being no, but I think that's not true. I imagine that there were some, perhaps not the majority, of colonial rebellions that were peaceful and didn't involve mass violence against the occupiers. I don't know if we want to put African Americans in this very same category, if that would, in their minds, constitutes a colonial occupation, but that was a peaceful movement. Really, almost across the board. I mean, you'd have to find some really extremist people to the, I don't know if it would be left and right or right of Malcolm X, who would be committing violence. So we're talking about very few people. India, I don't know enough about it, but obviously Gandhi was peaceful. I imagine there were some militant Hindu terrorists and militaristic people, much as there are today. So I really don't know enough about India in 47.
I've written down on my whiteboard here a solution.
To the conflict?
Yeah. I have what the Palestinians need to do.
Okay, well, let's just finish up the last couple of.
No, I'm gonna show my solution.
Okay, all right, let's hear it.
Make peace.
Well, I'm glad you have the whiteboard to write that out. Okay, make peace.
Make peace.
Well, I don't know. If Hamas came to Bibi tomorrow and said, we want to make peace, genuine peace, not just a ceasefire, right? So we're calling to make peace and to accept, even until the day that we come to terms with the PLO, we're going to accept Gaza as a peaceful.
Well, in order to make peace, you have to first gain trust.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I don't know if that's possible at this point. No, after October 7th, I don't think it's possible. I think that ship has sailed. On the other hand, then again, we made peace with Germany after World War II, so maybe it is possible. But it would have to involve, given the current geopolitical landscape, it would have to involve accepting that, for the time being at least, Gaza is their state. If only because they're not in control of the West Bank, and I don't see them ironing out their differences while with the PLO, while simultaneously making peace with Israel. I can't see all that happening at once. It's impossible. So unless they were to go under the PLO umbrella like those other factions did, and that will never happen.
They have to spend time building a state and putting their money into their own infrastructure and to bettering their own people rather than lining the pockets of their leaders and buying weapons to use against Israel. And after a certain period of time, trust is established, that they can make peace. That's how it works. But Israel's not going to make peace with a group of people that consistently want to kill them and have absolutely no qualms about admitting it.
Nor should Israel make peace with them.
No.
Yeah.
But so I would go back up a second here, right? Go back to that. There we go, to that rhetorical question, right? Has any bigger power ever made peace with a group of people that want to kill them and their citizens?
No.
I'm not aware of that. So if that is the answer, and that answer is actually historically factual, unlike this highlighted part here in their document. So clearly, they have the wrong idea.
Well, the other problem is that their frame of reference is Western colonialism, and the metropole, the states that controlled the colonies were thousands and thousands of miles away, right? So they wanted to kill them, but they weren't going to, kill people over in Britain. They were, killing their people on the ground in the colonies, and they eventually just left. I wouldn't call that a peace settlement exactly. But did they want to kill all British citizens? Well, perhaps, but it was not something that was even remotely realistic. Whereas the conflict here, and again, I will underscore, this is not a conflict of colonialism. This is an ethno-national conflict. And
I'm sure that there are other examples of people that are in close proximity.
Yeah, of course. Well, I mean, the Armenian genocide, were they a colonized people? Not really, until they came to think of themselves as a colonized people. And then, yes, there was Armenian terrorism to create a national movement against Turkish officials who went a little overboard and massacred 1.5 million of them in response. But so that's an interesting question about whether that's an ethnic conflict or a form of resisting colonialism. And it's not, I mean, because again, it wasn't colonialism until they came to think of themselves as being colonized. It wasn't.
All right, let's go down then to
the Armenians, like the Jews and the Greeks, really enriched themselves under Ottoman rule for many hundreds of years.
Hey, wait a second. Go back up a second. That guy on the horse there and that statue.
Oh yeah, we should have paid more attention to the art.
Isn't that the horse that they tried to get taken down?
Which horse?
Oh no, that was in St. Louis. Sorry,
Oh, you think that's Louis the 12th or the 9th? It was either the 9th or the 12th.
Right. No, this happened. This is Washington D.C., I guess.
Oh, okay. Well, they wanted to take. Yeah. Okay. So here. Okay. Great. Intersectionalism at work here. All right. So there you go. But no, with the Louis I forget if it was the 9th or the 12th. Yeah. People were trying to take it down, not because he was responsible for the massacre of thousands of Jews, which he was, and he's the one who expelled the Jews from France in the late 1200s, early 1300s, but because he was an Islamophobe. So again, we have a case of Jews not counting here. It was about one of the crusades that he launched. So if anyone did,
there's a big statue of him in St. Louis, Missouri.
Yeah, and so yeah, and at this point, we're going back 900 years. Like screw it, it really doesn't matter at this point. All right, based on that, we call for the following. Okay, here you wanted a solution. The immediate result of Israeli aggression on Gaza, the crimes and ethnic cleansing committed against the entire Gaza population, to open the crossings and allow the entry of humanitarian. This is straight out of the elephant in the room statement.
And actually, this will happen if they make peace.
Yep. But that's not what these
That
guys,
was,
this
that
is
was
not what the woke academics who signed the elephant in the room are calling for. Even though the first paragraph says hunt down Hamas, the rest of the document says immediate ceasefire and prisoner exchange.
Mhm.
It doesn't say anything about making peace. Ceasefire,
Yeah.
which is essentially Israel surrendering. That's what it comes down to.
Yeah. Well, they're morons.
They are morons, absolute morons. And the people who drafted the document are worse than morons. They're people who
No,
are.
no, the people that drafted the document are not necessarily morons.
They're not. They were very clever with how they drafted it.
Mhm.
Yeah. And this is Omer Bartov. He's very much the leading figure, along with the people at Penn State, like Schreier and especially Leora Sternfeld, who is running the show with this. No, this is a very, very duplicitous stuff. To hold the Israeli occupation legally accountable for what it has caused to human suffering towards the Palestinian people. So again, we get into woke speak here. So this is all replication of what the West has said, right? I guess they realize their 88 charter is not going to play, except among that moron on Facebook. What was his name? Peter Cohen, who I got that great title for a piece that I wrote. Look, I don't like Hamas, comma, but, which has to be one of the greatest opening sentences of all time.
Did we do a podcast on that?
On what did we do? Yeah, we did use it. I did
Yeah.
use that line, but I wrote an entire op-ed, about it, interpreting what such statements actually mean in practice. We call on these nations to initiate a global solidarity movement with the Palestinian people and to emphasize the values of justice and equality and the right of peoples to live in freedom and dignity. Okay. Yeah,
Well,
so
none of that would be necessary if they would just make peace.
you're 100% right. The only difference between this and in the West is that in the West, they make more of an effort to center Palestine, because here it's a given that Palestine will be centered. But in the West, they have to ensure that, these are Black Lives Matter and, queer liberation, et cetera, but Palestine, for whatever reason, Palestine.
That, but this global solidarity movement is already afoot. It already has been there for decades. I mean, if you look at the General Assembly of vote tally on all of these resolutions to condemn Israel, it's like 90% of the states that vote are condemning Israel.
Yeah.
So it's already there, what they ask for.
Yeah, but look at point number 7 here, and this is not just bad English. They really mean what's written here. But it is bad English. We urge for standing against the Israeli attempts to cause another wave of expulsion or a new Nakba to the Palestinians, especially in the lands occupied in 1948 and the West Bank.
Absolutely no effort on the part of Israel to expel its Arab population within the Green Line.
Yeah, but they're claiming that that has happened and that's something that has to be rectified and it's going to happen again.
The only example that I could throw out there is that in some of these peace negotiations or in some of these plans to create a peaceful agreement, one of the suggestions has been to move the Triangle region, which has a lot of the Israeli Arab sector, as being part of the Palestinian state, to swap. Yeah. So there has been that suggested, but the Arabs that live in the Triangle don't want that.
No, of course not. Now, it needs to be pointed out that between 48 and 1966, they were subject to certain military regulations in theory, if not really in practice. But it was still something always hanging over them.
It's not the same as expulsion.
Of course not. Not even close. It was a lack of trust, which made sense after what had happened in 48. And from my understanding, the only one that impacted them was their ability to travel on the highways to get from one village to another at night. But the other things were never enforced. And they got rid of that in 66. So the Arabs have had full equality since then, legal equality since then. Here's the closing page. I assume this is a paraglider.
That's what it looks like.
He's not getting very high. I thought paragliders, no, that's not what I pictured a paraglider to look like. And what's this thing?
Yeah, but you can't see the balloon.
Oh, yeah.
The balloon is out of the picture.
And what's this, a gigantic fan or a paraglider about to be launched?
That's the chair that they sit in.
Okay, so he's still on the ground. Okay.
Yeah.
You've been up in a hot air balloon, Adam. You know more about the stuff than I do.
Yeah, but it was a basket that I was in, not one of these things.
Well, maybe this should be your next project in Ohio. Try paragliding. Well, that's the end of the document. I think we've very much done it justice. We're close to this being our longest podcast, but no, I think it's an hour and 16 minutes. And folks, if you are teachers who are watching this, well, first of all, if you are among our enemies, I assume that you are using this in your class material in one way or another as historical evidence or contemporary political documents. If you are people who are on our side, who are predominantly the people who watch our podcast, I encourage you, if you teach anything having to do with anti-Semitism or the Middle East or Jews, work this document into your syllabus. Find a way to have people read this against the charter, in conjunction with stuff relating to Holocaust denialism, in conjunction with Gaza Ghetto, which Mira Sukharov and Chaya Halberstam published under the approval of the AJS a year ago. This is of that kind, right?
And I would also recommend a thought experiment to use with your students. Have them think about whether or not this plan is the right plan, or if the fuller plan to make peace is the right plan. Which of the two?
You should go on tour with your whiteboard.
Have them write a paper, right? Do you go with the Hamas plan or with the fuller plan?
And if any of our fellow, JSCN educators, have ideas about how to implement this into the classroom, we're your colleagues.
I will even grade the papers for you. Well, no, I won't do that.
Don't you're on camera. You can't do that.
Yeah, I'm not
Why are
going
you
to.
offering to grade? Who would do that? No, that's not a good idea.
I'm not going to do that.
I'd
No,
love to grade
that.
I would love to grade the papers for the woke professors who are going to assign this as historical truth. That would be a lot of fun. Yeah. And all I like to do is cut and paste text and images or screenshots of their 1988 charter. And I won't include video of the carnage of October 7th, because then I'll be accused of triggering and causing trauma. But that would easily negate everything that's been written in this document. All right, well, we are done, folks. And in a way, we have to apologize for having to waste this much time on discussing a joke. But in the annals of the history of anti-Semitism, this is really one of the more remarkable documents, right? I mean, if you want to compare it to Nazi anti-Semitic documents, there was a lot of vitriol against the Jews, the degenerate race, who were evil and all that, and the Germans were noble and all that. And certainly the Palestinians are doing it, but or Hamas is doing it in the name of the Palestinians and the Muslims, but they're presenting it in such a way that is still very much in progressive social justice language, right? They are toning down the violence. The Nazis didn't tone down the violence in everything that they wrote. They made it abundantly clear what they were going to do. So Hamas won't even own their violent tactics here, because it won't appeal to most of the protesters here, except for the Cornell professor who felt exhilaration. I think for him, this document would be very underwhelming. But beyond those guys, there are a lot of people for whom this really will resonate with them. And it's like, hey, the oppressed is speaking. We have to give them voice. We can't oppress the voice of the subaltern. And this is the subaltern speaking up, whether it's true completely or not, because their voices are oppressed. And no matter what, their voices are going to be mediated through the lens of the oppressor. This is our way of escaping from that. Whatever. Okay, as you can see, I'm not a big fan of subaltern studies. All right, well, thank you very much. I'm going to turn off screen share. Any final thoughts? I know you're going to hold up your whiteboard again. Okay, that's great. You got to get some new props. I think we're into repeats by now. Yeah, I think we've seen the whiteboard before.
Yeah, but you haven't seen my plan before on that.
That's true. That's true. That's a good plan. It's a lot easier to understand than the Trump plan. I have to give you credit for that.
It is. Yeah, it's a
the Trump one was kind of hard to follow.
This is the deal of the century right here.
It is. All you have to do is make peace, and you will have a state. You could have had it in 1947 with Resolution 181. Okay.
I'm not a warmonger. My plan is the opposite of war. Yeah. It's make peace.
I'm not a warmonger, but once we're at war, I'm at war. That's my philosophy here. I'm a liberal Zionist.
Unless the other side decides to surrender and make peace.
Yeah, but they have to surrender because they're losing the war.
Yep.
Yeah. I'm a liberal Zionist, and the day that we're at war, I check my liberalism at the door, because wars have to be won. And I will stand by that. Okay, well, this
In
is
fact,
Adam.
it happens to be the first law of nature from Thomas Hobbes, that we should all endeavor to make peace wherever it is possible. And it is clearly possible in this particular region, but they have to establish trust.
But my reading of Hobbes was that, basically the state of nature was violent and people were, constantly into, not to be anachronistic, but a social Darwinian, contest. And that the only solution was to accept the security of the benevolent leader above you.
That's how you make peace.
Okay, so you get the peace that way, right? But it's a violent world as far as he's concerned.
Well, but see, Hobbes says that once you decide that you want to make peace, the only way to maintain that peace is through the monarchy, the absolute monarchy, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But that's not the Fuller plan. The Fuller plan is to stick though to that first law.
Oh, you mean the Adam Fuller plan? Yeah, I thought you meant the complete plan first. Right, okay, yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, because Hobbes is very anti-enlightenment in many ways. It's not what someone like John Locke would subscribe to.
I don't want to get into that whole
No, I'm not a philosopher, just dabbled in some intellectual history. So that's
I don't think Locke and Hobbes are that different, but
really.
yeah, I don't. But I'm going to stop there. I guess if we get Andrew Pessin back on, we can have that discussion.
Okay, yeah, I'm not an expert on that. Did Hobbes influence Rousseau? Will you go that far?
Yeah.
Okay, all right, that's important because Rousseau is a little totalitarian in his ideas to a certain extent.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, well, we're not going to get into a philosophical conversation, mainly because I'm utterly uneducated in this, except for, TAing Western Civ and having to, teach some of these documents. But that's it. So this is Adam and Jared signing off and urging Hamas, in the name of the Palestinian people and the Islamic resistance movement, or Islam that they claim to speak on behalf of, to make peace. Make peace. Right. That's what their obligation is, because they're losing the war. They carried out a mass extermination, but that's not going to happen again so quickly, and they are not going to win the war. And even the court ruling today did not stipulate that Israel needs to engage in a ceasefire, which I think is as good of an outcome as we could have expected from the court. All right, let's sign off. You can put the sign down now. Yeah.
All right.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in.